Hi, this is Simon Obstall and welcome to another tutorial for Blender. And this is the second part of a tutorial in which we're looking at creating this moody monster foot scene. So in the first part we focused on the modelling, but in this part we're going to be looking at all the sexy extra effects that bring the whole scene to life. So let's make a start. So when we left it last time the project looked more or less like this, but I've done a few changes and I'm going to give you the project at this stage so you can start from here rather than having to do all the things that I've done. So I made a new collection to put the reference images in, and let's just hide that because we're done with that for now. You'll also notice that I put a ground plane in like this, and more importantly I've added some materials to everything. In order to do that I've had to UV map the foot, and it's all a little bit time consuming and dull, so I've saved you the labour of doing that. And so this project will come with all the materials in it. So there's just a little bit of extra modelling I want to do before we move on. I'm just going to turn off the ground plane here and then let's come in and just have a look at what we want to do. So with the foot selected, let's switch into edit mode. Just want to add some sort of foot pads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these faces here. So that row of three just in front of the talons there. You can see the seam that I've marked there if you're wondering what that is. So let's first of all just hit I, which activates the inset tool. So I and enter. We don't need to do anything else to it. We're literally just having that inset at the default. So let's go to 3 for the side view. And let's just zoom into here. I'm going to activate the move tool and just move it down like that. Then the rotate tool just to rotate these to be a little bit flatter like that. Come back into the move tool, move it down just a little bit more and maybe just sort of nudge it back a bit like that. And now you'll see we've got these foot pads here. And next I just want to activate the symmetry mode on the x-axis like this. I'm going to come into edges mode. I'm going to grab these two edges here and move them across like that just to round off those two outside pads, and then I'm going to grab these two edges here and move them out to round off that one there. So then there's one final thing I want to do, and that's to select this edge and this edge, those two there, and then coming to kind of top view here. Actually, let's come to the top view there. I'm just going to move them in like that just to refine that profile a bit more. Something I should have done previously. And that just gives us a better profile. So now I want to grunge this up a bit, and I'm going to do that using a displace modifier. So let's come out of edit mode back into object mode. Let's come to the modifiers tab and let's grab displace. That looks really gross. Let's just zoom out a little bit. So what we need to do is we need to click on the add new texture. Then we need to click on here to find our new texture. And from this menu here, we can browse the textures that are available in the project. And I'm going to go for the foot diffuse map there. And I need to come back to the modifiers tab and let's set the coordinates to UV, and then we just need to crank down the level a lot. So let's bring it down to 0.2 and also the mid-level down to 0.2. And then just to smooth this off a little bit more, I'm going to add another subdivision surface below this. So add subdivision surface, and I'm just going to turn the render down to 1, and that's just kind of softened off those spiky bits there. What I'm also going to do is turn down the levels of the first subdivision, this one here. So turn those down to 2, and you can see that creates a less crazy result. I think this is just a bit too too grungy. So let's go with that. So you'll notice that obviously this has applied the deformation to the talons as well as the foot. And actually I want to be treating the talons separately at the end. So I don't want them to be affected by this displace modifier. So how can I do that? Well, I'm going to switch back into edit mode. And if you remember, we created two separate materials, for one for the foot itself and the other for the talons. So I'm going to come into faces mode. I'm going to select one of these faces, and then I'm going to come to select and select similar and material. And you'll see that now I've got only the foot selected. And that being the case, I can use that to make a new vertex group to control the display. So you'll see that we've got the vertex group option there. So let's just come down to the data tab here. And in this vertex group here, let's make a new vertex group. And let's just call that foot. So then we can come to vertex here and vertex groups, and we can assign this to the active group. So if we come back into object mode and modifiers, we can select the vertex group from here, and you can see that it's now an option there. And you can see that having selected that, the talons are no longer affected by the displace. So in order to be able to move on to the next stage, we'll actually have to apply this first subdivision modifier. So it bakes in those extra polygons. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to hit Control A, and you see that disappears. And now those are effectively baked in. If we turn off these other two and we switch into edit mode, you can see those extra polygons in action. And they're going to be very useful to us. So let's switch out of edit mode. So then let's look at adding the fur, and this is relatively simple. So with the object selected in object mode, we're going to come to add and curve, and we're going to select fur. And you can see immediately we've got something that we can use. What I want to do first of all though is I want to turn off follow surface normals here in the interpolate hair curves. Just distribute them better. So I'm going to close all those down just to simplify things. So what are we actually looking at here with the fur? Well, it's actually, if we come over to geometry nodes, you can see it's a lot of clever geometry nodes just stacked up like that. So basically what it's doing is taking a curve and interpolating it across the surface of the mesh. So let's switch back out of geometry nodes and into here. So one problem that we have is that the fur is applying to the talons, and that's obviously no good to us. So what we can do is come into the interpolate hair here, and if we come down to density mask, that's this one here, you'll see there's this little icon here to the right of it, and if we click that, it all goes away. But we can use this menu here to select our foot vertex group, and you'll see that now that's mostly not applying to the talons. So why is it applying to some of it? This is because the vertex group has a little bit of a soft edge to it, and we can change that by a little bit of cunning weight painting. So let's come into the cube, let's select vertex groups, and then we can come into weight paint mode. And you can see here now the culprit, that we've got blue is no weight and red is maximum weight, but we've got this intermediate zone here, and we need to edit that a little bit. So I'm going to set the weight value to 0 because we want to paint in 0 weight onto those areas. And the way I like to do this is to select for the stroke line, because I'm absolutely rubbish at painting and it's much easier to do it with the line tool. So then I'm going to just draw across there, and you can see that as I do so, I'm painting in more blue. Do it here as well, paint in more blue. I'm not going to go all the way because a little bit of a kind of soft transition is quite good. So again, we'll do the same thing here. Let's actually come to Control 7 so we can see the underside of the model, And again, let's just paint in blue. You can see the hair's going away as I do so. A little bit of sort of extra hair I think is probably quite good. Have a look at the back there. Maybe just nudge it off a little bit like that. So that's what weight painting does to us. It allows us to modify the influence of the vertex group, and that's enormously to our advantage here because we've been able to kind of eliminate some of that excess hair. So now let's select the hair, which is actually a curve to which the geometry nodes have been applied, and we need to obviously change its material. So with this selected, let's come to shading, and you'll see that the fur material is selected and that the base color is white. Because I want to add an image map, I'm going to use nodes. So click on that, brings up the node editor. And what I want to do is I want to come to add and texture and image texture. Zoom in, pipe the color output into the base color. And then from this menu here, we'll again select the foot diffuse. And if we now render this, you'll see we've very quickly sort of added the same color as the foot. So just a couple of extra things I want to talk about in relation to the hair. You'll notice there are two modifiers here, one called curves noise and the other called frizz hair curves. Let's turn them both off and see what they're doing. So you can see without them, the hair is very uniform. It's all sticking out straight. But if we turn on hair noise, you can see that the hair is pointing out in all sorts of different directions and it's much more ununiform. If we look at frizz hair curves, what it actually does is it's frizzing the strands themselves, and those two together actually create a pretty good effect. You can obviously dial down the factor if you want less noise. So if we went for 0.5, you get a slightly more sort of uniform look. In fact, I think probably for my purposes, I'm going to go with that. So the other thing we need to do is crank up the density. So if we just render this, we can see that there's just not really enough hair going around. So we can affect the density here in the interpolate hair curves. Let's go for something like 2000 and see what that looks like. And I think that's more the look I want to go with. You can adjust that to taste. So there are basically two more things that I'd like to do. And the first of those is that I'd like to create some more interesting geometry in the talons. So you'll notice that the talons are a little bit smooth and we could do something much more interesting with them. But only if we come over to the cube and we commit these modifiers. So let's commit that displace and let's commit this subdivision. So in both cases that's hitting Control A. And that will give us enough polygons in order to be able to do the thing that we want to do, which is come over to the sculpting page and do a little bit of sculpting. So the sculpt radius, I'm going to go for 10, and the strength, I'm going to go for 1, and I'm going to use the first tool here, the default one, which is draw. So to do this, I mostly want to be looking down from the top view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of draw lines along like this, following the curve. And you can see that I'm kind of building a little bit more kind of geometrical interest into those talons. They look much more talon-like. Particularly want to kind of bring out this top line here, the one that kind of goes down towards the base there. And because I've got X symmetry enabled, obviously my top talon was the same as my bottom one. Let's just turn off the X symmetry a bit, just so I can make a slightly different version of that one. And I'm fairly happy with that. Maybe just do a little bit of work on the sides, and of course not forgetting the back. This is the important one here, the one that goes down like that. Now you will notice that there's still a little bit of kind of polygonitis here, and we probably need to add an extra subdivision modifier and just stick with 1, but that will just smooth off any kind of weirdness on there. So we're ending up with a lot of polygons, having started out with pretty much none. But as you can see, that's actually much, much better on these talons now. They look so much more convincing, or rather, they look much more like I would like them to look. So if we do a quick render of that, there you can see, I think, those nice sort of ridges on the talons, I think really really make a big difference. So finally, let's look at the factor that is going to bring this whole scene to life. So let's turn back on the ground plane. Let's come to this rendered preview view. Let's come over to the shading tab, and we need to select the world instead of the object view. And you can see that this world has got a background color being piped into its surface. But what we need to do is add a new shader. So if you come over to Add and Shader, let's select Principled Volume. And what we're going to do is pipe the output of the principled volume into the input of the world output volume. So let's do that. Oh, and suddenly everything has kind of disappeared. And that's because the default density is very, very high. So you notice it's at 1. So let's reduce that down to 0.1. And now I think you can see we've got this really nice sort of foggy effect. Let's go do it, give that a quick render. A little bit too much. So what we need to do is we need to position the light in the best possible way that it's going to create the effect that we want. So let's select the light and let's, I don't know, move it over to there on X. Basically, I want to get it shining from behind the foot. Let's bring it down a bit and let's have a look at that render. And that's already looking pretty nice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of adjustment to the camera position. So let's come to the camera. Let's set its Z position to 0.5 and its X rotation to something like 92. And let's push in on Y, across on X. And you can see this is a lot better. And we can just adjust that light to taste and, crank it up as much as we want. And, depending on where we position it, we can get some really cool effects. So position it nice and low. We get these really nice sort of volumetric streaks like that. Really, from here on, it's up to you to just tweak all these parameters and get the look that you want. Bearing in mind that you can do a nice little sort of camera rotate using the empty that we created. So, choose whichever view that you want or choose whichever animation that you want. But I think my job here is done, and thanks very much indeed for watching, and I will see you again, I hope, another time.